We pulled Pete Ricketts. We pulled Don Bacon in CD2, and we pulled Governor Pillen. And they're all very promising if I decide to jump into it. And I think that just goes to show, again, what we did. People are ready for a change.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Dan Parsons Show. I am your host, Dan Parsons. Coming up on today's show, the return of Dan Osborn, the independent candidate who damn near pulled off the most amazing political upset in modern history last November, when he came within single digits of ousting an incumbent United States Senator here in Nebraska. But before we get to Dan, just a couple of announcements. You know, however you get your podcasts, we'd really appreciate it if you follow and subscribe to the pod. For example, if you're an audio listener, I know a lot of people like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you're a video viewer, if you like the video version, just go to YouTube. We've got a page on YouTube and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. It helps a lot. A reminder to go to thedanparsonsshow.com and become a friend of Dan on Patreon. You'll help support the show, and you'll get a few VIP perks from time to time. And finally, stay tuned next week for a big announcement concerning our coverage of Lincoln and Omaha city elections that are coming up this spring. Some exciting, we're not done. We're never done with politics. We just go from one cycle to the next. And, but it is my pleasure to welcome back to the show, Mr. Dan Osborn. Dan, welcome aboard, my friend.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Dan. So we have two Dans here, so that could be problematic for your listeners. And you mentioned that there's video that you can watch this episode. And I just want to tell you, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or however you get your podcasts, we are two extremely good-looking guys. So I would highly suggest watching the video.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Very well. I mean, I suppose good-looking is subjective.
In the eye of the beholder. That's right. Old guys. Hey, what's it like being back to work? I mean, I know I watched you pretty close up. You and your family going through this exercise of running for office last year, your first time, and now you're back to work. What's that transition been like?
Yeah, it's been pretty unique, I suppose, would be the word I would use. It's a lot different than starting a new job. Well, it's not necessarily new, but going back to work and being on TV and the commercials and everything and being recognized. It's a unique experience, but also very familiar. So there's that familiarity that I'm good with. I've always taken pride in being good at my job. So, going back has been a mixture of emotions, I suppose, right? Like I really thought that we were going to do it. We were so close.
Yep.
And I never thought from day one that we weren't going to win that race, because I think people are certainly ready for it. But so here we are, and I'm back at work and doing a lot of different things. So in a way, it's nice. The familiarity is nice.
I bet. Well, I bet it's nice for the family as well, because for people who've never done it, and I know you and I talked about this early on, for people that never have done that, to run for statewide office or any political office, you really can't. I don't think you can prep someone for what it's going to be like, and because your race was so competitive. It got pretty personal. It got pretty nasty at times. And I just know from representing candidates for, 30 years in this state, it takes a toll personally on you and your family. So
it sure does. And it did, but it's also rewarding in ways too.
Yes.
Right.
That's why you do it.
it's definitely a personal sacrifice. But also, there's rewards. I met so many amazing people.
Yep.
And really the hardest part has been, Dan, just going a million miles an hour on the campaign, doing 6 to 7 events every day in different cities across Nebraska, Zoom calls, phone calls. During an event, I would get in the car to drive to the next event, and I would have 13 emails and 12 text messages to respond to. So
and they were all emergencies.
Yeah, everything's an emergency. Everybody has an idea, and it was great. And again, so many amazing people on the campaign and in Nebraska that I got to meet. But the hardest part was going from that to zero.
Yeah.
1,000 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour, and then waking up the next day and just being like, looking at my phone, and there's crickets, and just trying to figure out, wow, this is crazy. So coming down off of a high, I suppose, in a way, and figuring out next steps.
Yeah. Well, speaking of next steps, let's dive right into this. The highly respected Cook Political Report a few weeks ago, citing unnamed sources, said that you could be a candidate to run against Republican U.S. Representative Don Bacon, who our listeners and viewers know represent Nebraska's highly competitive 2nd District, in the midterms next year. And then in a follow-up interview with the World Herald, you said that you and your team are, quote, weighing all of the options right now. And those options, if I have this correct, tell me if I don't, according to the World Herald, that you told the World Herald, included the possibility of running against Governor Jim Pillen, or against U.S. Senator Pete Ricketts, or, as the Cook report said, entering the race in the 2nd Congressional District to take on Don Bacon, which you happen to live in Omaha in the 2nd District, where you handily beat Fischer last November. So, comments, thoughts? What are you doing next?
So I want a definitive win. And so I think that puts me as running as local dog catcher. I'm like, so many people are like, why did you start so high? Like, why the U.S. Senate and not city council or anything like that? And
legislature or county board or,
Sure. Mm-hmm. And I suppose my answer to that would be, we saw an opportunity to change the political landscape of America and, or excuse me, the United States. And, we took it. We saw a vulnerable, unpopular U.S. senator that was bad on certainly rail labor, and that's where this whole thing started from. But as far as what's next, again, we are, we've drafted a poll, and I don't want to divulge the poll publicly just yet. But
come on, you can break news here with your buddy Dan Parsons.
Yeah, I could. I totally could. Well, I can tell you that we polled Pete Ricketts, we polled Don Bacon in CD2, and we polled Governor Pillen, and they're all very promising if I decide to jump into it. And I think that just goes to show, again, what we did. People are ready for a change.
Yeah.
And as we approach 2026 with the current administration, I think a lot of people are looking for a place to go politically on both sides.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are fed up with the way things are being handled and what they see on their feeds and their media channels. And that's why, so I'll get into, without you having to prompt the question, I suppose, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Dive in, my man.
Okay. Working Class Heroes is what I started.
Yes. I was going to get to that. It's in my notes. Yeah. You started a new PAC, the Working Class Heroes.
Transition. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
please.
This goes right in line with what I'm going to do next and what I am currently doing. is recruiting candidates across the country. We have 12 House races targeted, and we have 3 U.S. Senate races targeted that our overperformance in Nebraska would have won those districts. And
do you mind naming, excuse me for interrupting, do you mind naming those 3 Senate seats off the top of your head?
How about I just name the states?
Okay.
Will you be satisfied with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can guess between the 6. It'll be this fun game where you'll have to guess. But we are looking at Iowa, Alaska, and South Carolina.
Okay, that makes sense.
But we are also involved in down ballot races as well. We have a candidate in Alabama running for state legislature. We have a candidate in Wisconsin running for assemblyman. So, we'll support anybody that is a true independent person. So the seawall, I suppose, for the candidates that we have to support is you have to have been an independent for a very long time, and you haven't donated money to either party or a candidate. And, I suppose, and you have to be behind labor, which is working people, wage earners. You have to be one yourself as well. I'm not interested in finding a lawyer that owns a law firm.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm interested in mechanics, plumbers, carpenters, nurses, teachers, bus drivers, those kinds of folks. Or it doesn't even have to be that. You could sit in a cubicle for 40 to 50 hours a week, earning peanuts, typing a computer, slaving away for a crappy hourly wage. That's the people I'm looking for.
Yeah, yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but according to my notes, the PAC has endorsed here locally Mike McDonald for Omaha mayor. Do I have that correct?
No, there is no official endorsement.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Who the hell gave me those notes?
Okay. I don't know.
Okay.
But we did support Mike with some early money, in the fact that, during the strike at Kellogg's that I led as president of local BCTGM Local 50G,
Yeah.
Mike is the president of Omaha Federation of Labor.
Right.
And he supported me hands down. If I could call him anytime, day or night, during that strike, and he would deliver whatever it was I was asking for.
So just to clarify, the PAC is not supporting McDonald, but explain to me who is then, or money from your campaign, or how, or you personally?
No, it's money from Working Class Heroes.
Okay, it is. All right.
Mike fits the bill. He comes from working class. He was a firefighter.
Yeah.
Definitely supports labor. And so that's why we supported him with some early money.
Got it. Well, your brand, you've created this new brand. You know me, my background not only in politics, but in marketing and public relations. I've been so intrigued, and I think that's why a lot of people were intrigued with what you did, Dan, is, yes, first time you've ever run for office, check. B, you're truly a working class individual. You've worked your entire life in the trenches, in manual labor, and working your ass off to provide for your family, and a true independent. I watched this race very closely, and everybody, the political leaders from both sides were just befuddled that all of this was true. It's like, wait a minute, this can't be true. This guy's got to have some kind of motivation as a Republican or a motivation as a Democrat, and of course, he supported policies that I think both of those parties can identify with. But so anyway, that's my commentary of why I think what you're doing is again politically fascinating.
And people, I talk about that for a second. People have a hard time, especially I would say Politico people have a very hard time believing that, right? Like Nobody could
Yeah.
actually be independent. Like you have to, you have to have your team. It's this. Our politics have become so tribal.
Yep. Got to pick a team, red team or blue team. Yep.
Yeah, and they even have a mascot. I mean, they have it all. And I think a lot of this comes from the fact that in order to win a primary, you have to be the extreme side of that team to move on. So that's certainly been problematic. That's the thing about an independent is you don't have to primary. You got to get signatures to get on the ballot and go on from there, which is sometimes no small feat depending on the state as well. They all have different laws.
Yeah. Nebraska is actually fairly easy.
It was, yeah. I had to have 4,000 signatures, 750 minimum between 3 congressional districts. We ended up getting 12,000 signatures. So it wasn't too difficult. And I would hate that if they started changing laws.
I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if some folks
surprised.
woke up and started changing that. So
both parties might agree to that because they're afraid of what might happen if individual Americans from the wage earning class start to rise up and run for these seats, which is what I'm trying to do now. But what's really disturbing about politics is the fact that we don't know what the truth is anymore, Dan. It is so muddled. I mean, you have your favorite news channels, which you believe are probably factual. But to what I've learned, coming from a space where I punched a clock and would work on stuff, to learning what I learned on the campaign trail and how our politics work. Everybody has an agenda. Everybody has an agenda, and usually their agenda doesn't involve helping out the regular wage earning, working class person. It's tough, and I think that's what people are going to start to understand. And I hope that we created a big enough spark to move this forward and to get people paying attention to this, because we have a two-party duopoly doom loop, if you will, where corporations and billionaires control it all.
Yeah. I'm going to poke a little bit more on these 3 options that you've named. And I totally respect that you're not answering that question, and I'm not going to press you on that, but I'm just going to make some observations about those 3 races and ask you to respond. But, let's start with the governor's mansion. I mean, the Republicans have occupied the governor's mansion since, 1999, and both U.S. Senate seats since 2014. Don Bacon has beaten his Democratic opponents in 5 straight election cycles. Everybody thinks he's vulnerable, and it has been a very competitive seat, but so far, the Democrats anyway have not been able to find someone to take him out. So handicap that for me in a hypothetical way of those 3 seats. Because I have some opinions as a longtime political observer of which of those 3 would be the most advantageous to your messaging. But handicap those for me.
You can't say that and not finish it.
Well, let me hear your thoughts on those 3 races or those 3, and then I'll happily give you my thoughts.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of thought process that goes into it, right? Like, which one could I be the most impactful for working people?
Yeah.
And then from there, you have to decide also which one is winnable. And then you have to get into the meat and potatoes of a race, of a House race, a Senate race, or a governor's race, and how that looks, which it also encompasses fundraising and it's not just about getting votes. You'd like to think that if I would like to think if I entered a race that people would see who I am and what I'm trying to do and know that I'm genuine about just helping people in general, and I'm best suited to be there versus a pill and a rickets or a bacon. So that's the thought process behind it all. There's a lot more than just like picking one.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the statewide race of U.S. Senate. You have an incumbent, Pete Ricketts, who won his first election very handily, was appointed to the seat
Yep.
by Governor Pillen, I believe, because of the Good Old Boy program. You could argue that his money got him there, and then he's got the R next to his name in the red state of Nebraska, which I'm not saying anything about anybody with an R next to the name because I got an I. So I definitely have seen both. I can see both sides to so many issues, but those are just the facts. And then the fact also remains that Pete Ricketts' net worth is.
He happens to be a billionaire. Yeah.
Whatever
and his daddy's a billionaire. So
somebody is, and he comes from extreme wealth, which I suppose for who I am and where I come from sets the stage nicely, right? I suppose
pretty good contrast. Yeah.
You're looking at David versus Goliath, and you're looking at establishment versus the working guy. So the contrast is certainly there nicely for a Ricketts run. But is it winnable with that kind of money? Because in the reality that we all live in, I mean, money talks. We all know that. And so it would be certainly an uphill climb. So now you get into the governor's race, which I think we would be pretty even. Starting out anyway. We would certainly, I suppose the contrast there would be, a lot of our policy issues would have some contrast on the direction that we would like to take the state, and issues that we'd like to see be successful here. I think we would have a lot of differing opinions on that. And then, but also the governor's race, you could argue, about how much effect you could have on people's daily lives. I think that might be the race where you could affect the most people's lives. Because if you're in a representative in the House, you're one of hundreds. So, I suppose effectiveness on people's daily lives and in trying to enrich people's daily lives from having a workers agenda versus a corporate agenda really be impactful.
Well, and it's certainly a different style of style of leadership too. And I'm not making any judgment of which style you would have or you'd excel at, but certainly being the CEO of a state is a different task than being, as you said, one of 365 or one of 100 policymakers who are trying to affect policy change instead of being the CEO and, overseeing, state agencies and setting tax policies and balancing the budget. So it's a different set of leadership skills for sure.
It is. And then there's a question of money there too, because Jim Pillen is not broke. He is the biggest hog farmer in Nebraska.
Yep.
And he has got a tremendous amount of money. And he will have the backing of the Trump administration and Pete Ricketts as well, who's got a stake in our state legislature and our governor. So I'm not just running against Jim Pillen when it comes to the governor.
Yep.
So, all of these, I think, are uphill battles for me. And we knew they would be. It was an uphill battle from the beginning with Fischer. But it's an uphill battle for wage earners across the country anyway, to get a seat at the table to discuss workers' issues versus, just getting into the corporate. So then that brings us to CD2, which I did win by 14 points. So it stands to reason, I suppose, if you're looking at that race, that could be the most winnable. because of the performance I had there. But also there's so many things that go into it, right? There's going to be, I had the luxury of having a one-on-one race with Senator Fischer in CD2. That probably would not work out that way.
You would expect a Democrat to file and run.
Of course.
Yep.
Of course.
Yep.
And, I suppose at that point it would just be my brand of politics versus Congressman Bacon and whoever the Democrats would put up. But ultimately, again, would a three-way race be winnable with an independent? Traditionally, an independent is a spoiler, and that's not who I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't just want to get into a race. I don't have ambitions to get into office just to get into office to say, oh, look at who I am. I want to make a difference. So that's something that this is what keeps me up at night, Dan.
Hey, you've had enough rest. Damn it, get back in there. I'll answer your question. Your political analysis of those three races would mirror mine, Dan. I completely agree. I think you would have the most opportunity in that second district for the reasons you cited. The money with Ricketts and frankly the money for the governor's race and
and CD2 would be money too. It would be
oh yeah.
I don't have infrastructure that I would be able to utilize that the Democrats and the Republicans would do.
Yeah.
So it would be a struggle, but it's one of those things too that I don't mind the struggle. I don't mind the fight. I think that all started with Kellogg's and seeing the way our world is run and how billionaires and corporations are controlling everything. That's what I wish people could understand most.
Mm-hmm.
If I could activate the microchips that the planes in the air are dropping in, that would be. I'm kidding. Chemtrails.
Yeah. Well, when will you make that decision, do you think?
So I have a pretty high level meeting with my staff on Tuesday, and that is going to be the main topic of discussion. And I know, there's so many variables, but I just want to do the right thing, Dan. You know me. That's what I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
I want to do the right thing by people. And I see a lot of problems in our politics in this country today that concerns me. And I think this, the whole thing about this is getting a win to show people that this is possible, and this could take American politics in another direction that it currently is not on, steering the ship, I suppose, whatever metaphor you want to use, to show people that there's a different way, and it's an honest way, and again, it's a workers' agenda way, and workers, farmers, cattlemen, everybody.
Yeah.
That makes this country work on the day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I've got just a couple more questions, Dan, before I turn you loose here. And we could spend another half hour talking about this, but just give us a sense of how you have viewed these first few weeks of the new Trump administration. And I'll just use one example. President Trump. Yeah.
Oh, I've heard of him.
That guy. Yeah, that guy. I'll just use this example because it's, happened in Omaha. So Vermont Senator and Independent Bernie Sanders recently visited Omaha and I think he called it his Fighting Oligarchy tour. There were overflow crowds, of thousands of people. And so do we have an oligarchy problem right now in America? Does that even make sense? there are so many things that have happened in the last few weeks that President Trump has resumed office that has just left people scratching their heads. And I could go on, and I know you've heard this, but so how does the reaction to some of those policy changes and abrupt dismantling of federal government and firing people and the whole Musk, speaking of oligarchs taking over, how does that expected response from voters weigh into who you are and what you represent? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How do you view that?
Well, and I would say with this administration or any administration, whether it was Harris or Trump, my stand does not change. And there's a statistic that would go in line with what I'm saying, that less than 2% of our elected officials in both the House and Senate come from the wage earners or the working class, right? It's a complete misrepresentation of the demographics of people in our country. I think our government should look like the people of the country, plain and simple, and it does not currently. That's not DEI. That's not an inclusion. That's just a simple fact that your government should represent its people and should look like its people. And so that brings the question, is it an oligarchy right now? Or maybe it always has been. The billionaire donors calling in favors to support elections.
Yeah.
I know working class people can't afford to buy representatives and senators, but corporations and some individuals certainly can. Now, what I find disturbing, and what I've read just I think I read it this morning, was, and there's the video of it too, Elon Musk having a meeting with the president of India. Hopefully I'm saying that right, because I just read it this morning.
I think you're correct. Yes.
Hopefully the president, yes. In the Oval Office, and Donald Trump is not there. Our president of the United States is not attending this meeting.
It's like your high-end VP crashed into your boardroom and called in, anyway. It's odd. The whole damn thing's odd, but keep going.
The media asked the president, they said, hey, Elon Musk met with the president of India today. Did he meet him as the CEO of an American company, or did he meet him in the official capacity of a role in the U.S. government? And the president said, are you talking about me? And he goes, no, we're talking about Elon Musk meeting the president of India. What capacity did he meet with him? And he said, oh, well, Elon's got his hands in a lot of things, and I'm sure they had a good conversation and blah 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 blah. He never answered the question, but that right there is the true definition of an oligarchy.
Yeah,
is a billionaire that works for the government, but also has government contracts with the government, who happens to be a CEO of a business, inviting presidents of other countries into the Oval Office.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're MAGA. I don't care if you are as liberal as it gets. Everybody should understand that is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a great example, Dan, of what's going on. One last question, and I swear I'll sign off and get you out of here. We talked about the campaign and the effort that you put in from border to border. What's one story or one location? What was beautiful about Nebraska that you took home after this grueling campaign? What is it that would motivate you to do it again? And what's something beautiful about that campaign that you can talk about?
That's a good question. So to precursor that, I did over 200 public events across the state, and my events were a little bit different than I suppose a regular candidate would be, in the fact that I drew in people from both sides. Because if you're running as an independent, they're just like, oh, wait, what? Everybody's always going to try to put me in the box of Republican or Democrat, but for me, that doesn't exist. For me, I think it's just about the people and representing the people and where they're at and how they live in their communities, and hopefully helping their communities thrive. But I was in Columbus, Nebraska. There was about 75 people there. The room split in half between the Trump voters and the Harris voters, and I was a bit concerned about that, because this was one of the bigger crowds that I was starting to get as the name recognition grew. And I told the people at the very beginning, I look, like, you're all citizens of the United States, and you break it down, then you're citizens of Nebraska and Columbus, and your friends, your neighbors. So let's have a great conversation, and let's just talk about, and let's just focus on issues that's going to help the people of Columbus. I don't talk about the top of the ticket, because that becomes so polarized. So let's just keep it about how
Be a short evening.
it would be a short evening. So yeah, exactly. So let's just talk about how we can enrich people's lives, because that's what I'm here for. That's why I'm doing this. And it turned out to be a great event. And both sides, whether you're wearing the blue hat or the red hat, both sides were nodding their heads. And there's just really good people across the state of Nebraska, people that care, they're passionate, whether what side they're on, they're passionate. They care about the place that they live, the community, the state, and the country. And they just want to see what's best for it. And I think, to close it out, if I did lose, but if I did nothing, I brought people together, because I would drive across the state and I would see Osborn signs next to Harris signs, and I would see Osborn signs next to Trump signs, sometimes within a block of each other. So,
yeah. Well, that absolutely answers my question, Dan, because that is beautiful. I couldn't ask for a better example of why you did what you did, and the rewarding part of it, of bringing people together. So that's what we're trying to do with this damn podcast. So Dan Osborn, thank you, my friend, for coming on. Keep us posted. We'd love to break the news once you've made those decisions of what's next for you. But we'll be watching, and appreciate you very much. Hey, thanks to Penology Tech Solutions for their technical help and equipment, Kim Remington, Parsons Public Relations Director of Operations, and Chase Porter, who produced this episode. And most importantly, thanks to each of you for listening and tuning in. As we continue to grow and expand our audience, thanks for sharing this episode on your social media. That's the show. Thanks for tuning in. Now go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.